On our 7th wedding anniversary, my husband held my babysitter's daughter's hand and told me she was pregnant. The baby was his. He had guilt on his face, but not much. Let's get a divorce. Chloe is pregnant, she just graduated from college, her wonderful life is just beginning. I can't have people pointing fingers behind her back, I have to give her a name. I slapped the girl and asked angrily, why, there are so many men in the world. The girl's face reddened, but her voice was undaunted. Sister, your family has been sponsoring me for many years, and I'm grateful, but love is selfish, and I can't give up my love just because I'm grateful to you. What's more, you and Ethan couldn't produce a child after so many years of marriage, and he can't have a family business as big as his without someone to inherit it. I laughed out coldly. Since she likes picking up trash so much, of course I chose to fulfill them. It's just that for this family business, I'm afraid the child in her womb isn't qualified to inherit it. When Ethan asked me for a divorce, I had just brought the last dish out of the kitchen. Today is our 7th wedding anniversary. I had planned to spend a sweet world of two with him, and I even woke up a bottle of red wine that I had been collecting for years. I didn't expect Chloe to actually show up at dinner with a cake, saying she came to congratulate us on our anniversary. I was a bit surprised, but still greeted her warmly. Just as he brought the last plate of food to the table, Ethan, who was sitting across from him, opened his mouth in a deep voice. Don't be busy, sit down, I have something to talk to you about. His expression was serious. Chloe was seated next to Ethan's position, her lips pink and slightly swollen, her cheeks a flushed red, and her hands constantly fiddling with the china spoon in front of her. There was something strange about the atmosphere. It seemed like something had happened to them during the time I was busy in the kitchen. I drew a kitchen paper towel and wiped my hands, unclipped the apron I was wearing, and snickered, so serious, making it look like the disciplinary committee is looking for me to talk to. Ethan's face flashed with discomfort, but his tone was as calm as ever. It's like this. He coughed softly, seeming to have some difficulty saying it. There was a long pause before he added, Stella, let's get a divorce. I was confused for a moment. Then I subconsciously said back, what are you talking about? There are outsiders here, and you're not afraid of people laughing. Mentally, I blamed him a little for joking around. My reaction made Ethan's face look a little embarrassed. He looked out of the corner of his eye to Chloe, who was full of tension beside him, and coughed softly again before rushing to me and saying slowly, I know that mentioning divorce at this time is very sudden for you, and I've been struggling painfully for a long time during this time, but I don't want to hide it any longer. Then he took a deep breath and confessed to me, I'm with Chloe. It was like a thunderclap in my head. You and who? My voice instantly rose from shock. Chloe is the daughter of a nanny who used to babysit for my family. Her mom worked as a nanny for my family for over 10 years to earn money for her bedridden husband. When she was little, Chloe was dirty and skinny all day long. My parents took pity on her and started sponsoring her since she was in elementary school. Until a few years ago, when my dad's factory closed down. Her mom left our house. Chloe was in her freshman year of college when my dad's factory collapsed and he had a lot of debt, so I continued to finance her until she graduated from college. I remember Chloe as a well-behaved little girl 6 or 7 years younger than me. Seemed soft and fragile. It never occurred to me that she and Ethan would cross paths. I looked incredulously at the two in front of me. Ethan, however, seemed to have made up his mind. He simply took Chloe's hand, and the two of them clasped their hands together. He said to me, Chloe checked out pregnant last week. The baby is mine. It was probably so much information that I didn't know how to react for a moment. Ethan was a little afraid to look me in the eye as he continued, I know it's cruel to you, but I can't have a child born with bastard status. We've been married for 7 years, and you haven't conceived a child, and my mom has been pushing me all day, and I'm under a lot of pressure. Also, Chloe's only 23, I'm 7 years older, she's giving up a great career to choose to be with me, a married man, and I can't let her down or have people pointing fingers behind her back. I'm begging you to let it go, make Chloe and I whole, and I'll make it up to you as much as I can in the division of property in the divorce. His words were like a sharp sword, stabbing me right through the heart. We had been using contraception all these years after our marriage because we had been in a period of career development. Plus then my dad's factory had a crisis and went bankrupt. One thing after another. That's why it was delayed, and he was well aware of the processes. Tonight, I was going to take the opportunity to talk to him about having children. But I didn't expect him to give me such a big surprise first. It has been proved that people in the extreme speechlessness and anger, on the contrary, will be able to laugh. Yes? And how much of my property are you going to share? The family's company was something he and I had built up together. I had a smile on my face, but my nails had pinched hard into my palms. Ethan was about to speak when Chloe interrupted him with a tug on his coat. Chloe interrupted him with a tug on the corner of his shirt, fearing that he would say something about dividing up too much of my fortune on impulse. With a sobbing voice, she said, "Ethan, why did you suddenly confess our relationship with my sister without discussing it with me beforehand? By doing so, you made me look like a despicable mistress who interfered in your marriage." Again, I was exasperated and laughed. Somewhat curious as to how one defines one's identity in her case. Does she also think that the unloved one is the mistress? So it seems that my family has really read into the dog's stomach by subsidizing her education all these years. Chloe stood up from her chair and walked over to me and knelt down with a thud. "Sis, I'm sorry, I know you won't forgive me no matter how I explain it to you, I'm sorry. Blame me if you want, I couldn't help but fall in love with Ethan, he had nothing to do with it." She huffed and puffed, tears welling up from her eyes. Eyes red like a frightened bunny. I looked at the girl who was kneeling in front of me with tears in her eyes but with a smug, provocative look in her eyes, and raised my hand and slapped her hard across the face. Hitting her was my extreme disappointment in her. I asked her hoarsely, "Why, there are thousands of men in the world." Chloe instantly reddened, but her voice was undaunted. "Sister, your family has sponsored me for many years, and I'm grateful, but love is selfish, and I can't give up my love just because I'm grateful. What's more, you and Ethan couldn't produce a child after so many years of marriage, and he can't have a family business as big as his without someone to inherit it." I was shaking with anger at her words and wanted to raise my hand to shake her again. Ethan quickly stepped in front of Chloe and took the slap hard. He shielded the girl behind him and pulled away from me. "Stella, this is all my fault, come at me if you want to hit or yell at me, don't blame Chloe, she's innocent." This scene stung me deeply. I couldn't help but snort in derision. "She's innocent? That means you forced yourself on her? With that she still doesn't call the police and is actually willing to give you a child, then you guys are really a good match, scumbags and sluts." Chloe's face turned from red to white, her pale lips trembling. Ethan's eyes chilled a little bit. "Stella, do yourself a favor, don't speak so viciously, Chloe, she's simple and kind, she's not even in the same category as you. In order to get the order, you and those men in the business world drink to drunkenness, being hooked on the shoulder and waist by others, and still don't know if you have done more excessive, on the cheapness, who can be more cheap than you?" His eyes quenched with poison, and he blurted out the words hidden in his heart. My brain buzzed and all the blood rushed to my head. Anger made me lose my mind. I grabbed the glass on the table and slammed it down on Ethan. The glass grazed his brow bone and fell to the ground. The sound of broken glass was particularly harsh in the silent space at this time. Those barbed glass slag grain by grain into my heart, like a million arrows. "Ethan, you fucking asshole." Ethan's face pales for a split second as he realizes he's out of line and tries to open his mouth to say something else. I threw a stream of food from the table at them. "Get out. Get out of here, all of you." I was hysterical. Blood oozed from Ethan's brow bone as he looked at me mad with a look of fear and anger. Chloe hid behind him a little stunned, only nervously covering her stomach. Ethan's eyes glazed over. "Crazy. You're insane. I don't know what I saw in you." Chloe was right, you're a bitch. Ethan took Chloe's hand and angrily slammed the door. The loud slamming of the door fell on my heart like a heavy hammer, knocking the breath out of me. A few moments later, the room returned to silence. The silence was oppressive and dull, like a huge invisible mouth swallowing me up. It was like all my strength had been drained out of me, my legs gave out and I fell into a chair. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't shed any tears at all from my sore eyes. The brain was in chaos. The once affectionate husband, once he tore off his hypocrisy, his real face was so disgusting. The girl that my family has been sponsoring for more than 10 years calls me sister and says that she is grateful to me for her words. But behind the scenes, it's long since rolled with my husband. The thought of their interlocked hands made my stomach lurch and I wanted to vomit. I wanted to vent, to roar, but my throat felt like it was blocked and I couldn't make a sound. My heart was clenched into a ball, and even my teeth were fighting. In the end, I still looked at the wrong person. We have survived countless difficult days and nights together, accompanying him from nothing to today's bright and brilliant. Those busy figures in the humble office, those images of taking the work in their own hands in order to save expenses, are still fresh in our minds. But now he is holding another woman's hand and telling me she is pregnant. The heart aches. All my limbs are hurting too. When we got married, the company was just starting out and had no external competitive advantage at all. The markets all needed to run on their own. My family has a small factory, but it does export clothing and has no intersection with the software industry we started in. My dad's contacts wouldn't have been able to reach out to the industry, and Ethan's the kind of guy who thinks highly of himself. He can't even talk business with his face. So I chose to run the market. Ethan is responsible for technology and maintenance. In those years, for the company's business, I often needed to go out to socialize. Sometimes those unsuspecting customers, in order to deliberately make things difficult for me, will let me drink all the white wine in front of me. But I'm a good drinker. Even better than most men can drink. In the business world, everyone basically respects each other. But there will always be some trash who try to take advantage of women in the name of drunkenness. Occasionally, I felt aggrieved and would spit a word or two with Ethan. When he heard it, his eyes reddened with heartache. Hugging me, he said that he would never fail me in his life. But how could I have ever imagined that the boomerang of the words I once said when I was aggrieved would end up sticking me in myself? The air smelled of rice, and the thick vegetable soup snaked down to my feet. I didn't move. A shrill ringing phone interrupted my thoughts. Glancing at the caller ID, it was my mother-in-law. The ringer cut off and rang again, back and forth 3 times. I had no choice but to slide it to answer. My mother-in-law's slightly huffy voice came through the receiver. Stella, what's wrong with you? You haven't answered your phone in half a day? Something wrong? I was breathless. Tomorrow is the day your dad needs to go to the hospital for rehab, so don't forget and remember to come early. The tone was as condescending as ever, with an air of command. My father-in-law had a brain tumor removed 2 years ago. His neurological function is impaired, with limited movement of his left hemiplegia and slurred speech. Now he needs to go to the hospital every week for rehabilitation. Except for the beginning, when Ethan accompanied his dad to the hospital twice, I basically took care of the treatment for the next 2 years. My mother-in-law only knows how to play mahjong and square dance. I found a few caregivers, but they left after a while because she was too harsh. In the end, I had to take care of the transportation myself. Twice a week hospital rehabilitation and 3 times a week Chinese medicine clinic massage and acupuncture. His health is improving little by little. Within a short distance, he can already walk independently without crutches. I'm not available tomorrow. I have an afternoon tea date with a friend. I refused outright. My mother-in-law was furious. Can having afternoon tea be as important as accompanying your father to the hospital to recover? What the hell are you doing as a daughter-in-law? My mother-in-law didn't used to be like this, and would even be careful to please me. But since 3 years ago, my dad's factory went bankrupt and closed down. She probably thought that I could no longer count on my mother's family, but now she had to live under his son's nose. Her attitude grew more and more brutal. Seeing that I didn't respond for half a day, the woman on the other end of the phone got louder. I don't care what you have tomorrow, put it all off, take your dad to rehab first, and deal with the rest when you get back. Her attitude could be described as tough. I took a deep breath and angrily said, "Don't use your father in every breath. My father's surname is Shin, not Song. From a legal point of view, only Ethan is obligated to support you. I am at best related to you, and that's even during the duration of my marriage with Ethan. If I divorce him, what do you think you are in my place?" The mother-in-law choked. Her voice shook with anger and she dropped, "Stella, you wait for me. I'm not done with you on this." After that, she hung up the phone angrily. Turned the phone off. I sat up all night with the mess on the floor. It was ironic to think that I had planned to celebrate 7 years of marriage with my husband. I didn't realize that it would become the backdrop for our marriage. At dawn, I called the property cleaning service. Went to the bathroom again to wash and clean up and change into a dress. I was just about to leave the house to go back to my parents' house when Ethan came back. He came in the door and raged at me, "Stella, how can you be so uneducated? My mom is the elder, how can you scold her with such harsh words?" My mind spun. There was absolutely no recollection of swearing at his mom for anything nasty. I didn't have time to watch him go crazy. I walked straight to the foyer to get my bag and car keys. He reached out and stopped me. "You're coming with me right now to apologize to my mom." I pushed his hand away, sick. Then pulled my heels out of the shoe closet. Ethan, however, was unforgiving. He held my arm tightly and said, "Stella, the divorce is between the two of us, you shouldn't take it out on my parents, they've always treated you like their own daughters, now come with me to my parents' house and sincerely apologize to them. She treats me like a cow or a horse, and even says she treats me like her own daughter. This is how her family treats their daughters." Anger was almost ready to spill out. I picked up one of my heels and aimed the thin heel at his head. "I'm going to count to 3 and you're going to fucking let go. 1, 2. The 3 words hadn't even left my mouth. As I raised my arm high in the air, ready to slam it down on him hard, Ethan shrugged it off and ducked out of the way. Ethan looked at me in shock. With an angry curse on her lips, "Are you crazy? A shrew like you, I'm going to divorce you." I tightened my expression and said, word for word, "Divorce is fine, I want 70% of the property." "That's impossible." Ethan answered decisively, "What right do you have to share away 70%? For the sake of my debt to you I will at most share half of your property. You accept it, don't accept it, big deal, let's file a lawsuit." I looked coldly at this repulsive man, hoping that sharing half of my property was already a concession on his part. "Fine, then I will accompany you to the end." After saying that, I picked up my bag and keys and slammed the door. I drove back to Mom and Dad's house. But when I got home, I realized that Mom and Dad weren't there. I've been so busy lately that I haven't been over to Mom and Dad's side in over half a month. I called my dad to find out that my mom was sick and hospitalized. It was pneumonia from the flu. They were afraid I'd worry, so they never told me. I drove to the hospital in a panic. I didn't expect to meet my father-in-law and mother-in-law in the hospital parking lot, who had come for rehab. Eunuch cocked his head and sat in the wheelchair. When he saw me, his expression was actually somewhat hateful. It seemed like he wanted to scold me. I was a bit speechless. I've worked hard to take care of this old man for over 2 years, and I've been taking him between the hospital and the Chinese medicine clinic 5 days a week. His wife and son don't care about him at all. Now I didn't bring him to the hospital just once. And now he's resenting me. It's true that 2 kinds of people can't come out of the same family, they are all a bunch of white-eyed wolves. When my mother-in-law saw me, she wrapped her arms around me and snorted lightly, "How about that, now that you know you're scared, you're rushing over to apologize to me? If you can get down on your knees and beg me, saying that you're wrong, Ethan's father and I might still be able to forgive you, otherwise, you won't be able to enter our Song family's door again." It made it seem like I was rare to enter their front door. I looked pale and rolled my eyes back. "If you're sick in the head, you should get it looked at while you're here at the hospital today and not make a fool of yourself here." I walked towards the inpatient elevator without looking back. My mother-in-law broke her guard. A loud tirade came from behind her. Within minutes, Ethan called. I just blacked out the number. I don't even have to think about it, it must be his mom who went to tell on him again. I'm not in the mood to listen to his ramblings. Once upon a time, he was my husband, and I could tolerate his parents for the sake of our relationship. Now he's just a cheating scumbag in my life, and he thinks I'm going to give in to his parents? The elevator went straight to the 12th floor and arrived at the ward where my mom was staying. Seeing my mom, my nose turned sour. Mom, why didn't you tell me when you were sick? How hard it is for me to feel in my heart when you're like this. My mom smiled and patted my hand. What's the point of telling you except to give you one more thing to worry about? The medical care over here is great, and my pneumonia wasn't that bad. I was fine after a few days of hanging on to the fluids. I couldn't control the tears that welled up in my eyes. How can it not be serious? She's obviously lost a ton of weight, she looks haggard, and my dad is bearded. It's definitely not a simple pneumonia thing. Under the pretext of going downstairs to the hospital to buy something, I walked out of the hospital room and went straight to the doctor's office. After asking the doctor, I found out that my mom was hospitalized for a large irregular polyp found in her lungs. The polyp was surgically removed and the tissue was sent for examination and diagnosed as early-stage lung cancer. The doctor told me not to worry too much, that follow-up treatments had been arranged, and to keep her in a good frame of mind and keep up with her nutrition, which would help with the follow-up treatments. After coming out of the doctor's office, I crouched in the stairwell and cried for a long time. As a daughter, I can't believe I didn't even know my mom was sick. My dad was the only one who was with her when she was hospitalized for surgery. But I was in that home, taking care of Ethan's dad like an old mom. What did I get out of 7 years of marriage? Drying my tears, I returned to the hospital room. I pretended as if nothing had happened. I stayed at the hospital for the next few days. My mom rushed me a few times to come home as soon as possible. Said it was enough for her to be taken care of by my dad. I understood what she meant. After all, I was married and I was afraid Ethan would be upset if I didn't come home every day. At this point I didn't want to tell my mom and dad that I was ready for a divorce. Just said that everything is organized at home and I don't need to worry about it, and that the task now is to take good care of her health. But I never thought that Ethan would bring Chloe to my mom's hospital room. I don't know where they found out the number of my mom's ward. When the two of them entered my mom's hospital room arm in arm, I froze, and my mom was even more stunned. Ethan panicked and tried to pull his hand back, but Chloe had both her hands in a death grip. I snarled at Ethan in a low voice and pushed them out the door. Let's go home and talk about what's going on, and don't bother my mom at the hospital. Chloe looked at me provocatively. Divorce is not something unseemly, why do you have to go home and talk about it? I'm not afraid as an unmarried one. What are you afraid of, sister? She deliberately raised her voice. I lowered my voice again and snarled, Ethan, take your woman and get the fuck out of here. Or I'll call the police. Chloe was relentless. I'm here to ask you one thing, you're taking 70% of Ethan's marital assets, on what grounds? The company is all managed by Ethan, you are just a housewife, what you eat and wear, which is not Ethan's money earned, what qualification do you have to ask for a share of so much property? You just see him as honest and good at bullying. I'll tell you, with me around, there's no way I'm going to let you get away with this. She had a furious, angry face. It was like a proper original wife, coming to question the mistress who had robbed his husband's property. My mom's agitated voice came from the hospital room. Stella, are you going to divorce Ethan? I pleaded in a small voice. Ethan, Chloe, my mom just had surgery, she can't be stimulated, can we go outside and talk about it? Just then, my dad walked out of the hospital room with large strides. He looked coldly at the three people who were tearing each other apart, and instantly understood everything. He swept his gaze toward Chloe, who involuntarily flinched and quickly separated her hands from my shirt. My dad's eyes were full of disappointment and chills. After all, Chloe is the person my family has been supporting for over a decade, and now she's the third party interfering in my marriage. My dad's voice was as cold as ice. Is this how your parents taught you to behave? Ungrateful and shameless. Chloe's body trembled. When she met my father's gaze, she was immediately ashamed and red in the face. She whispered wryly, "Uncle, feelings can't be forced. Ethan and I are in love with each other. There's nothing wrong with me. As for the money you funded me with before, the big deal is that I'll return all of it to you at that time." My dad grunted and sneered twice, and didn't pay any more attention to her. Instead, he turned his head to me. "What are you going to do?" Although his voice was cold, his eyes were filled with heartache. I let out a bitter laugh. "The woman outside of him is pregnant and hitting me in the face. What else can I do but get a divorce?" My dad then asked, "And how are you going to divide the property?" I said, "I'm going to ask for 70% of the marital property." My dad nodded. "Makes sense. I'm the one who originally put up the startup capital for that company, giving him 30% as a handout." Chloe screamed out again, "Why? That's Ethan's company. What gives you the right to take 70%? My dad knifed another look over his shoulder. She reluctantly shut her mouth, but still mumbled. My dad raised his palm and slapped her hard across the face. "Bastard thing. This slap is me teaching you a lesson for your mom, since she doesn't know how to discipline her daughter. I'll do it for her." Chloe froze in place in shock. Ethan immediately stepped forward and pulled Chloe behind him. "Dad, what's the point of hitting someone when there's something to talk about?" His voice was as small as a mosquito, despite his questioning tone. He had more than a little fear and respect for my dad. Once upon a time, he groveled before my dad and ingratiated himself at every turn in order to marry me. Later, after I married him, my dad took out $3 million as startup capital for the company. At that time, he couldn't wait to kneel on the ground and kowtow to my dad. My dad's voice carried an irrefutable pressure. "Ethan, on account of the fact that you and my daughter are husband and wife, I don't want to make too much of a mess. You take 30% of the property and get out, or else I'll make sure that you'll never have a day of peace even if I pour out all of the family property that I have left right now. You know, I can do what I say I can do. Big deal. I will die with you, but I will never let you bully my daughter." My eyes burned and tears welled up in my eyes. Ethan's face was ashen, but he finally nodded through clenched teeth. He naturally knew the meaning behind my dad's words. My dad added, "Tomorrow at the latest, send over the divorce papers, and if you try to play any tricks with the contract, I'll make you look good." After a pause, he added, "By the way, just now the surname's son said that she wanted to return all the expenses that I used to subsidize. I will also give her a detailed breakdown tomorrow. Fortunately, I have kept this account." Chloe's body swayed, barely able to stand. Ethan held her up just in time to keep her from collapsing. A month later, Ethan and I got our divorce papers. As per the divorce decree, we did a property division. Ethan wanted the company. He talked to me about exchanging all his assets with me for shares in the company. Of course I agreed. I just need to get my 70%. So he borrowed more than $10 million to transfer my share to me. At this point, more than 3 months after our divorce, Ethan had temporarily rented a rehousing unit, waiting for his company's profits to turn over again. I used some of the money I received from the divorce to rebuy a cottage. I thought I would go through a painful transition period after divorcing Ethan. But things were just too much. I didn't even have time to grieve. I took my mom and dad on a trip for a while and came back to set up the cottage and plant flowers and plants. It felt like every day was busy. Time rushed by and most of the year passed. At the end of the year, Chloe gave birth. She gave birth to a pair of twins. I didn't intentionally inquire about this. Ethan threw a big banquet and also held a party for 2 days in a row in the square in front of the neighborhood where they lived, inviting a team of lion dancers and internet celebrities to support the party. A small half of the town knew about it. It didn't make any waves in my mind because I was preparing to open a company. After some discussion with my dad, I decided to get back into his old business. Open a thermal underwear factory, plus yoga clothes. That way it can be sold in all seasons. This time we are focusing on the domestic market. Dad has decades of experience in factory management and in producing garments. I hired him as my production consultant. And the industry high paid to dig up two young and powerful designers. Build sales team. Separately responsible for e-commerce and offline. Offline sales mainly go to run the market, supermarkets, and other cooperation. The pre-commerce is mainly supply to the anchor or other e-commerce companies. We do not do retail, the main wholesale or distribution. Probably because of the lightweight, the clothing factory runs smoothly. Although unlike Ethan's previous software company, each order may be hundreds of thousands or even millions. But clothing, food, housing, and transportation is a necessity of life, as long as the operation is good, belongs to the fine line. It's winter again. My family's thermal underwear suddenly saw a sudden surge in sales on the recommendation of multiple online celebrities. The e-commerce store keeps adding new orders. Workers work 3 shifts, and the sewing machine is stepped on until it smokes. When the Chinese New Year was approaching, my friend came to my factory to choose a warm suit to give to all the elders in my family in the spring festival. After the selection, she was in my office and had kung fu tea with me. During small talk, she mentioned that Ethan's dad died 2 days ago. She said, "I'm telling you, Ethan's dad just died the day before yesterday and that house stinks." I was a little shocked. Although his father had suffered brain nerve damage and had difficulty moving, his health was quite good. How could he pass away in such a short time? My friend said, "I heard the bed sores were rotting all over his body and he died of living pain." Ethan left his dad at home unattended and picked up his mom to take care of that Chloe and the twins, and her mom comes home once a week and cooks a week's worth of meals in the fridge for his dad to heat up and eat at home by himself. At first his father could move, then I heard that he couldn't get out of bed and was hungry and screaming in the house every day, and then he suddenly stopped screaming. The next door neighbor was worried that something had happened and called the police, but when the police went there, the man was already dead and the house stank to high heaven. This was indeed a bit tragic. I was stunned. The friend added, "It's not over yet. What's even more outrageous is that the old man hasn't been buried yet. Ethan's mom is looking for a good home. She's been looking forward to the old man's death, and she's got a date 2 years before the foreigner." I think back to when Ethan's dad was sick for 2 years. His mom really didn't care about him and never cared about his condition. She dressed up every day and went out early and came home late. Maybe there was someone else out there from that time on. I guess Ethan took after his mom. I only listened to this matter and didn't worry about it. After all, whether my ex-husband's family was dead or alive had nothing to do with me. 2 months later, Ethan came to see me. The factory guards didn't recognize him, so he said he was here to see the goods, checked in at the gate, and came in. He found his way to my office. At that time, I was discussing the design of the new spring-summer yoga wear with the designer. Seeing him poking his head in the office doorway, sneaking around, I snarled, "What are you doing here?" Ethan immediately piled on a curt smile. I told the designer to go back and make more changes. "I'll see her later." Ethan sent the designer to the door and closed it. I looked at him coldly. The once spirited man now had a gray face and wrinkled clothes. "Stella, I came to see you this time to ask you a favor." I still didn't make a sound. He smiled awkwardly and said to himself, "My company is in a bit of difficulty. There are a few big orders that will expire next month and will not be renewed. They found another software company. Can you go and help me find them to talk about it? I can reduce the price by another 10 points. So that's what the fight was about. You're perfectly capable of negotiating on your own. What does this have to do with me? I sneered. His expression surfaced remorse. Last year I offended 2 of the person in charge. The 2 years the market situation is not good. They would have talked to me to let me drop 10% service fee. I was directly vetoed. The contract expires this year. They are 2 no longer renewed. I do not know what the situation. The back of several large orders are also all due to be no longer renewed. I didn't know it would be like this. If I had known I would have let those 10 points go. These customers are the ones you talked about before. Can you help me go and talk to them? I've agreed to lower the price now. Don't worry, after the matter is accomplished, I'll definitely give you less than your share. Simply stupid. In the past 2 years, so many software company service providers have taken the initiative to reduce prices. His software company is not like the international software company, many systems irreplaceable. What exactly is he proud of? I smiled slightly. His eyes immediately lit up the light. I smiled and said, Mr. Ethan, if you come here and want to order thermal underwear, I'm more than welcome to do so. Anything else is off the table. What you're talking about has nothing to do with me. I don't even understand how you have the nerve to come to me. Remembering the insults he had once hurled at me, I reminded him, after all, this looking for business is a lowly thing to do, and how could I be on my way to do it when it's your own word? Ethan was so anxious that he was on the verge of crying. I, however, was in no mood to watch him perform his misery at my expense, and directly called security and blew him out. After Ethan left, I looked at the order information I'd gotten from the professional manager I'd hired and laughed out loud. Back when my garment factory was stabilized, I registered a software company in partnership with a friend, although my information was not shown in the shareholders' information. The company runs essentially the same business as Ethan's. Over the past 2 years, I have poached a number of capable software engineers from his company. Those orders, too, were basically snatched up by me. Now he wants me to negotiate for him. Wouldn't that be letting me rob my own business? Ethan's company was filed for bankruptcy and liquidation after 2 years. The company was boarded up. Even the desks and chairs were pulled by the loan company to cover their debts. And at this time I started a new relationship. The other guy was a college physics professor. He was also in a second marriage. I heard that it was a peaceful split with his ex-wife, who stayed at a physics research institute abroad, never returned to the country, got a green card and married a foreigner. I was introduced to him by a friend. He's mousy and funny. Contradictory, isn't it? But when you see him and talk to him, you realize that these two words fit perfectly in him. Usually we didn't talk much. He was busy with physics research and I was busy with factory management. When he had vacations, I would take time out and walk around with him. 2 years into my marriage, I became pregnant. When my husband accompanied me to the hospital for a maternity checkup, he actually met Ethan and Chloe, who were running after an ambulance transfer van, crying and running. In the car lay a 5 or 6-year-old boy, covered in blood. The transporter went straight to the resuscitation room. When the door to the operating room closed, 2 men were paralyzed in the doorway bawling. I came down from my examination and heard a discussion about a little boy of 5 or 6 years old who had fallen down the stairs and had been brought to the hospital, but sadly had not been resuscitated. The scene of Ethan and his wife pushing that little boy and running suddenly came to mind. Could it be their child? I didn't hear the full story until later. I heard that Chloe and Ethan's mom was addicted to mahjong. In order to go out for mahjong, she locked the 2 small children in the house. There was nothing to eat at home. In the afternoon, the kids were so hungry that they wanted to find their mom. But the phone doesn't work. The little boy remembered watching TV where he could slide down the tree outside the window to the first floor. He wanted to do the same. Ethan's house is on the 4th floor and there happens to be a large tree not far from the window. The little girl carries the stool. The little boy climbed to the window. As a result, his feet slipped and he fell straight down from the balcony. Little girl scared wow wow cry, poking out half of the body crying out brother, brother. Which attracted the attention of the people downstairs. A neighbor called the police to pry open the door. It was only then that everyone noticed the little boy who had fallen in the greenbelt behind them. So they rushed to call 120 and notified Ethan and his wife. I was so shocked to hear that I couldn't speak for half a day. A living life was buried by their family just like that. Think of the scenery when the 2 children were born. Nowadays, the ending is so sad that you can't help but sigh. Then later, Ethan and Chloe divorced, with custody of their daughter going to Ethan. Since the death of her son, Chloe has gone into a state of half dementia. From time to time, she has to look for her son. Ethan's mom, he kicked her out of the house. Never to return. So she went to that old flame. The children found out about it, and they were adamantly opposed to them being together. 2 guys sneak off to a hotel. Caught red-handed by the old man's daughter first, Ethan's fucking clothes are thrown downstairs at the hotel. In the end it was the hotel staff who found her 2 clothes that the client had left in the room for her to wear, so she could walk home. After this incident, I heard that she left. No one knew where she went. About 2 years later, I saw Ethan on the street by chance. My husband was holding our daughter and I was holding his arm, going to the mall to buy some supplies for our daughter. I ran into Ethan and his mouth open to say hello. But I continued to talk to my husband about it, teasing my daughter every now and then. I didn't even look at him. A whimpering sound seemed to come from behind him. But it was inaudible, as it was covered by my daughter's giggling. I won't look back. Because my happily ever after lies ahead.